Welcome back to the Rude Dude Podcast, the show that puts some pep in your step, takes some weight off your plate, and reminds you that haters are going to hate, but you are loved. We are your favorite recovering alcoholics, Cameron, the Cree Davis, and myself, Henny Lokes, the Lobster Sheridan. Want to send out a quick apology for last week. I know we missed one. And Cameron had some issues at work. I had some of my own personal stuff going on. I couldn't fire off a solo, so that was my fault. But to those of you who reached out and asked where the episode is, we absolutely fucking love you guys. So thank you so much. How are you there, Cree?
You know what, man? I'm glad you just jumped right into that. Yeah, dude, people were fiending. They were like, "Hey, man, what was going on?" I was playing "Hello Darkness, My Old Friend" on the Instagram. Like it was wild, dude. It was the sound of silence, but we're back. We're good. I'm excited today, dude. Very excited for our guests. Very excited to be here, man. I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm doing well too, man. As protocol would state, I got my workout in. I'm ready for this episode. I'm excited about it. So why don't you introduce our guest?
Okay, so we have number one best-selling author, the author of this wonderful book. If you can see it, let's see if we can get into focus. Can I do it? I can't do it.
He cannot.
I cannot. Oh God, he's fumbling the bag. I'm so sorry, Shanea. I'll try. We'll read it. What is it, Shanea? Shana. Jesus H. Yes, this is terrible. Shana.
Rip it up.
Yep, there we go. Number one best-selling author, Shana Clancy, the author of the book Transforming Trauma into Triumph. A very fantastic book. I got to read it, and she's going to come on here and share a little bit about how to overcome some trauma. She has a very interesting story. And so without further ado, after me butchering that terrible intro, let's introduce her. Welcome to the show, Shana.
Hello. So glad to be here. You guys are the best. I loved the intro because there's nothing like Candid, and I love it. So I'm glad to be here.
I feel like people are like, oh, so this is why Henry always does the intros.
Yes. This is exactly right. See, that was way out of our norm, Shana. So I was way off. You go, oh, and Cameron, I can't even. I think I
threw you for a loop with that one.
Yeah, dude. I think we talked that we were going to do the normal intro, and then you're like, "Hey, Cam, why don't you introduce him?" So here we are.
We made it. And my book I can put in focus for you.
Oh, there we go. Yes, there we are. It's a fantastic book.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Blessed. I woke up this morning and just glad to be here.
Amen. That's right. Well, I first of all, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and generally what you do before we get into the heavier stuff?
Sure. Yes. I am a registered nurse by trade. I have my doctorate. Don't always go by Dr. Shana Clancy, as we were discussing backstage before we hopped in here. I'm a mom, a wife, a number one best-selling author, and avid advocate for recovery, whether that's mental health, substance use. I'm actually a fellow of the International Association of Addiction Nursing and a certified addiction registered nurse as well. So it's my passion: mental health, forensic nursing, all that stuff.
Nice.
You've come to the right place. You'll fit right in here. We're that with minus like 5 degrees.
Yeah. Well, we'll probably get into this, but it was a hindsight. I realized maybe some of that was coping, right? You just kind of like.
Yeah. And I believe you're kind of in my neck of the woods. I don't think I told you, but I'm in Morgantown, West Virginia. And I heard in some of your stories that you went to Pitt and Eat Shit Pitt. And
come on.
Yeah, Mountaineer. I'm in Mountaineer country. But yeah, some of the places you were talking about is right around my neck of the woods. So
yeah, Pittsburgher 412.
Nice.
No, okay.
I put French fries on my salad.
Yes, that's a very East Coast.
What?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, West Virginia.
They don't do that in Cali, do they?
No, they sure as hell don't. They don't.
You guys are too busy eating bougie sushi and everything else.
No.
It's kale.
We can't afford that stuff out here, man. Quinoa and salads and shit.
All right. Well, so you have Man, I was listening to one of the episodes, and obviously there was a very large traumatic thing that happened to you, but there was a lot of other, I don't even want to say smaller, but other traumatic things mixed in there. But why don't you tell our listeners about the night that changed your life, the
Yeah.
fateful night?
Absolutely. The night that changed my life, I was actually at a Pitt football game. I was in the middle of nursing school, had decided I wanted to go be an EMT so I could learn a little bit more about the ropes and pre-hospital, what that looked like. And I always wanted to go to a Pitt homecoming game. I did. And we were pre-gaming. I wasn't like a big partier, but enough that, I mean, I had my fair share throughout college. And that night, I knew I had to go to work. And it was at midnight. So I stopped drinking in my mind, stop drinking at this point. I'm going to be good for later. I'd already done one transport with a patient, and the second transport ended in a double fatal vehicle crash. And that was pretty heavy for me. I completely shut down, hated my life, hated myself, and just didn't even know how to pick up the pieces in that moment because I was trained, not only as a public servant at the time, but in training to be a nurse to save people. And two men were killed on the scene.
Were they in another vehicle, or were any of them in the ambulance with you?
So the two that died were in a different vehicle. They were in a red Chevy Cavalier. And there was actually a patient that I was transporting in the back that was in his 90s. He passed a couple of days later, and it was ruled out that was not directly related to the accident. Had it been, it would have been 3 people that died because of my poor choice. I actually had my partner as well, who was a medic at the time. He still practices as a medic, was in the ambulance as well.
So that is incredibly, incredibly heavy. And, I can sit here and kind of go off on a small little tangent here. That should have happened to me like 5,000 times, right? Like, because I drank and drove like constantly, like, because Hen and I are recovering alcoholics. And the fact that I was able to skate by like without actually having something like that happen to me just sends chills down my spine. You talk about being in complete shock. I wonder what did that exactly feel like? And was there a definitive moment when you realized like, oh, hey, these people are dead? Did you find out on the scene, or was that
On the
shortly
scene.
after? Oh my God.
I don't even know who opened the door to the ambulance. In full honesty, it was stuck. I just went into like mode of like, how do I help the patient in the back? Like, what just happened? I legit have no idea still to this day who opened the door because it was jammed. I could not open it myself.
Okay.
And whenever, you have to call dispatch and, hey, let them know I just wrecked this ambulance. Like, I need you to send other people because now we can't even get this patient where they need to go. And everybody and their mother came, right? So when that happens, it doesn't happen very often. And especially at like 2:20 in the morning, there was a lot of people that showed up, and it was somebody else who was assessing. They would not let me go over by the car because it's instinct, right? If in that role is to go start serving and helping, and they were like, no, just stay over here. And I heard somebody say they didn't have a pulse, and it was in that moment that I just was like, I just went numb. I couldn't even begin to process that. And the only thing I could think, and the only thing I kept repeating once I got to the trauma bay was that, oh my God, I just killed 2 people. And I knew that I had drank earlier, but I thought I was fine. I had no clue that alcohol was in my system until that happened September 23rd. I found out the night before my birthday. November 3rd is when charges dropped. And so I was in limbo that entire time.
So at what point did they like suspect or test you for blood alcohol?
Yeah, great question. So it's protocol when you're in that kind of position. There's a zero tolerance. So if you're in an accident, you're automatically going to have to go get tested. And so when they did the blood work, when they got to the hospital, all that stuff was ran.
My
And
goodness.
so what were the initial charges? I'm curious.
Wow. Everything was doubled, and I had vehicular homicide, involuntary manslaughter, reckless endangerment, DUI, a lot. Like they were stacked. I had felonies stacked out the wazoo.
Yeah, they always pile it on initially. Man, I'm just almost speechless because I can't even imagine how that felt. I mean, I woke up in jail and that's not fun. But imagine that stacked on top of knowing that you killed a couple people. I can't imagine. So walk us through kind of the rest of that night and going to the hospital and what that whole process was like.
That part of the process was just super traumatic. I was there, I was admitted for like a day, but it was the after part that was really the hard part when the shock wears off, right? Because your adrenaline's through the roof, you're in shock and your body's just trying to like cope. But I decided to take 2 weeks off of nursing school, and you can only miss so much. I was in a fast-paced program, so I was already behind and decided, you know what? My mom said the best thing to me: you might not know what the future holds, but they can never take your education away. So I was like, all right, I guess I will stop wearing my hoodie and my headphones and looking like, I hate the world, because I do. What I really hated was myself, and went back to nursing school and just pressed through. And it wasn't, like I said, until November 3rd when my charges dropped and I went to that preliminary hearing where I had never been incarcerated. I'd never been in jail before. I'd never been in any of those situations. And it was that hearing I was held without bail. And I had no clue what that meant in that moment. No clue. Like I couldn't pay my way out. And like you said, you woke up, so you know what it's like to be in the cell, but I didn't even know that me not coming home was an option that day. So, long story short, about like 8 hours later, I was released on my own recognizance, which for anybody that doesn't know what that means, it means you don't pay a penny to leave jail. So I went from not being able to physically pay my way out to walking out. And that's because there was a separate hearing that was held. I wasn't a flight risk, like all these kind of things, but I had to check into pretrial services weekly. There was a lot that came with that. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't easy at all. And a lot of therapy, a lot of EMDR. I say between EMDR and my spiritual belief is God, between those two things, there's no way I would have made it through.
Yeah, it sounds like after the shock wore off, like all of a sudden reality sets in, right? I think we can all as humans like almost relate to that. I know like Henry mentions getting arrested, like kind of like the first time you get arrested, you're sitting there, like you're almost in shock. You're like, hey, what's happening here? And then all of a sudden when you're sitting in a jail cell, you're like, oh shit, this is reality, right?
Yeah.
And so I imagine that the amount of anxiety and depression during that time frame while you're sitting there waiting in limbo was probably pretty insurmountable. For me, I sit here and I struggle with that. The thought of not knowing, hey, how long am I going away, especially looking at charges like that?
I was looking at 32 years.
Oh, God. Oh. So since this is a recovery podcast, did we start drinking again or anything like that, or did you just stop right away? I'm just curious because I probably
stopped,
drink away.
But like full transparency, I was on Xanax at that point because I was in such like fight or flight, like PTSD, all those things. So it was like all you could do is just like try to cope. They just would throw stuff at you. And I'm like, what is going on? So at that point, it's almost like I'd never been on Xanax in my life. So I'm like, oh, Z-Bar, yes, please. Because like I cannot focus. I can't, like I would start to float. Like the panic from the anxiety, like you said, was just so bad.
So I just want to make sure I understand the timeline. So obviously they took you to the hospital after the accident, and then they did book you immediately that night, or they didn't?
No, so that happened September 23rd. I didn't get booked until November the 4th.
Wow. That's kind of wild. I'm also surprised that they OR'd you as well with no bail or anything. I mean, obviously, I'm assuming you had no record or anything or no previous charges.
No.
Wow.
But like you said, that's very, very uncommon. Very uncommon. And I know that. Like I said, I had a very good attorney, but I also believe beyond a shadow of a doubt, like that higher power was on my side that I just didn't see in that moment. Things were just so dark. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. It wasn't until afterwards when I really started to like unpack all that. I was like, you can't make it make sense other than that.
Yeah.
Okay, so take us through sentencing and then going into prison. Now, for the audio listener, Shanea doesn't look like she belongs in prison. She doesn't look
Not
like
at all.
someone who would go to prison. She's not. She doesn't have like face tats or anything. If you're
No.
sitting here picturing like this gangster, it's not her. She doesn't belong there. So just to paint this
Not the gangster
picture,
name though.
You do. You do. Hey, you're a gangster to me, dude. You've done more jail time than me
He's a
and Henry.
spiritual gangster. That's true. So yeah, take us through sentencing and then prison.
Woo, sentencing. Sentencing was like reality was really hitting it. I went to that sentencing and I was just like, I don't even know what is ahead because you know how, well, I guess I can only speak for myself. I made some crap decisions still after this accident happened. Like I ended up getting engaged right before I went to jail. I was dating a new person, got engaged, went to jail. Like, where is my thought process in that? Like, how are you going to have a future while I'm in jail? Like, right. So when I like you break that down, you're like, that just didn't even make sense. But sentencing, like I had a really good support system, the community, a lot of family, because they knew me like as a person and not for like what had just become my life, my reality. Since I was such a high profile case, this I didn't talk about earlier. And I don't know if you heard this on any of the other podcasts that I've done, but I literally would be in the middle of nursing school on a unit and my face would be the top story of the breaking news while I'm taking care of the patient. So just on top of that, it was just such a high profile case that like every other high profile case, you're put into solitary confinement, right? So you go in and it's like they put you on the mental health pod and they're like, have a seat, get comfy. You're lucky if you come out an hour a day. Like, let's just kind of that's how they do it. So you're almost in like a protective custody type situation. And I remember like begging to be released to General Pop, like Gen Pop. I'm like, this is no, like just put me on the F pod. And by the way, I did my time in the worst county jail in the United States. It is one of the worst county jails.
Where is that?
Allegheny County Jail. So the sentencing, they hauled me off and the family and rightfully so was they were mad at the sentencing. I took a plea deal and my thought process behind that was that I owned my really bad decision. I owned what happened and I couldn't see putting somebody that I'd already affected that I didn't know through a trial. Like in my mind, I was like, I feel like that is even worse than everything that has just happened because now you've got to rehash all this stuff. So I did agree to a plea deal. And the sentencing, like they were not happy with my sentence. I mean, and how can you fault somebody for that? Right. You can't bring people back.
It ended up being 23 months, right?
Well, it was 11 and a half to 23 months with 5 years probation, 100 hours of community service each year, all consecutive. And I did my full 23 months.
Yeah. And in all honesty, not to be an asshole, but that doesn't seem like a lot, for two people losing their lives. So I would understand why the family would be upset.
Yeah. That's why I said, like, I there's nothing I can say to that. Right. It is. And yeah, 100%.
Yeah. What was that like trying to juggle being trying to be a normal person in society and then being in the spotlight? Was there any sort of harassment going on where people, telling you that you needed to be locked away forever and then other people being supportive? Was there a mix of that?
Oh yeah, there was a mix. I mean, I was a butt of the joke on DVE radio. What else? I think there was even a South Park thing that included the situation.
Oh, goodness.
I mean, you name it. I mean, it happened, right? And I remember there were so many reporters that actually we lived on private property. I grew up on like a farm. So we had like a mile-long driveway where they weren't allowed on, but they would sit at the end of the driveway and, that kind of thing especially towards the beginning. Yeah, it was more, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. And so a lot of it was like kids making comments to my siblings. And like, that wasn't cool because they didn't make that crappy decision or deserve that. So that was definitely the effect. My family, they took a lot of crap.
It's interesting to be sitting here talking to you. We got a new kitten and they just decide that they need to have PE and playtime down here where I record.
It's
going
fine.
crazy.
It's fine.
I love it.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting to be sitting here talking to you, the person who the thing happened to, because as I was listening, I was thinking, oh yeah, in every one of those stories, that person doesn't really exist. They exist in theory, they're out there somewhere, but now here I am sitting looking at you in the flesh, and it's like, oh yeah, that person's just a person who made a mistake. I also think about it like with famous people a lot and athletes
and that's what people forget.
Where people go, oh, that kid's an idiot, and it's like they just gave a 19-year-old $80 million. What would you have done? Me and Cameron would have fucked it up too. So it's like,
dude.
That's just a person. That kid's an idiot. No, he's a kid. He's a 19-year-old kid. But anyway, it had me sitting here thinking, how many times have I laughed at the expense of someone that isn't a real person, quote unquote, but it's on the other end is someone like you who clearly is a real person. And we make people the butt of the jokes because we can't see or touch them, but they're here. Does you understand what I'm saying? Like,
I do.
It was crazy to have this realization, like, oh, someone with feelings who's a person that just made a mistake is on the other end of that, and that kind of fucking sucks.
Yeah. But we all make mistakes. That's the thing. Like, we all do. It's just dependent on like what level or magnitude. Like, do we realize in that moment, like who it's going to affect, how it's going to affect? No, because we aren't obviously clearly thinking in that moment. It's selfish in that moment. You're 100% right. Like there's always somebody on the other side. And something I like to say, there's always 3 sides to a story, yours, mine, and the truth, right? Because it's all about perception.
Yeah. So I have a question.
Yes.
2 years in jail can have one of 2 effects, right? Like either people can come in, they can, and they can come in a criminal and they can come out a worse criminal, or they can come in and they can come out a completely changed person. Obviously, we're sitting here on this podcast, so we know the result of that. But was there a defining moment while locked up where, say, a God moment happened. Like I like to relate that to when I hit rock bottom and I woke up and all of a sudden I was determined to get sober. It's like a spiritual awakening. And when I explain it to people, they don't quite understand it when they haven't hit it, but something changes because I imagine something had to change internally inside of you to be able to handle this. And reading your book, I mean, obviously I've gone through how you did that, but for our listeners, can you explain, was there a defining moment?
There absolutely was. And it only got worse once I got in. So I'm going to touch on these deep things real quick and then bounce back to that if that's cool. Because
Sure.
after just being in for a few months, I was sexually assaulted by a prison guard and then sent to another jail that was Washington County. And when they did the investigation, they pulled me out of this like writing class, and it was like these guys in black suits, and they're like, "You're coming with us." And I'm like, "What do you mean? It's not time for me to leave jail yet, right?" So we're talking back street, like movie things you see in the movie, put in the back of this random car. It's the FBI, and going down all these back roads that exist into a federal building. And they gave me a Subway sandwich to eat, which was like the first fresh vegetable I'd had in God knows how long. Yeah. And so then after that was moved to, like I said, Washington County Correctional Facility, and was never supposed to step back in ACJ. But when I did, was physically assaulted by multiple corrections officers. And I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty because I'm really big on trauma informed care and secondary trauma, but like to the level that you would see, like, what is that movie where like that person's like tied to a chair, like that Hannibal Lecter?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So legit, that's the stuff I went through when I came back. Just that in context. So the aha come to Jesus moment really came when it was just like me, myself, and I. Nobody knew where I was in the justice system. They had no clue, not even my attorney. I wasn't able to make any calls. I was just put in this cell and couldn't make phone calls, all the things. And I had a relationship with God, like growing up. My grandma used to take me to church, but a lot of things happen, right? And I would just cuss him out. I would tell him about himself. I was mad at him. Like, why the hell did you put me in this situation? But the reality was it was me. And so when I came to that moment, I remember looking out the window of my jail cell, and there's like this flag on top of one of the hills across the window that I was looking out of for protective custody. And I was like, you know what? There's all these people running around outside of jail that are stuck in this mental bondage. Like they are not free, right? Because I'm thinking about hindsight, like how was my life beforehand, and just started like I had a lot of time to think.
A lot of time to think.
And so I was like, I'm in jail. And I felt more free than I did when I was on the outside. Like, how does that make sense? And I literally remember saying to God, God, if you give me a second chance, I promise I will not be coming back here. I will do whatever mission that you have set before me, whatever that looks like. I had no clue what that looked like. And really just tried to help people around me in that moment, because it was a revolving door. I was like the person that everybody came back to, like, oh, hey, I need a soup. I need this. I'm like, okay, I got you. Cause this is like your 7th time through the door since I've been here. They called me the mini lifer, but it was really the aha moment was when I just was like, you know what? People might be outside of this jail, but they are in that mental prison, that bondage, spiritual, whatever that looks like. That's worse, if you ask me, than being incarcerated.
That's interesting. I do want to say too, like for those people who don't know or maybe think you're being facetious, in Sacramento County, if you get arrested and say you like spit on a cop or punch one of them or something, they're going to take you into the jail. They're going to take you to the bottom floor, and 5 of those dudes are going to beat your fucking ass. So those things you see in a movie, that stuff really, really does happen. And when you're on the inside, there's not a lot that can help you. They're pretty much in charge of you. But that is quite a revelation to have, because one of the things I was thinking about as we were talking, when you go to jail, you don't understand what it's like to have your freedom taken away until your freedom is truly truly taken away. When there's a door right there that you can't open, that's the wildest shit ever. And there's no, your mom can't come save you, your buddy can't come save you, nobody can get you out. So, but knowing all that and then having this realization that I may be more free than some of the people on the outside is actually kind of mind-blowing. But it makes sense to me. I think that would be very hard for me to come to in that position, but I understand, you know, that the angle that you're coming at. That's pretty incredible that you had that kind of revelation, I guess, in there.
Yeah, it hit me like a ton of bricks. There's like you said, Cam, there's like, it's like this spiritual awakening, even regardless what that looks like beforehand. It's like that moment just where the rubber met the road for me, and it was just like the light bulb went off.
Yeah, and I think there's like a few little points in your book that I highlighted that were actually, and it's probably around the same time frame, you know, that you're talking about this, because it's just it's kind of in the beginning, but it goes, I became unwaveringly determined to succeed, not despite my past, but because of it. Every challenge I faced only fueled my determination to overcome my past experiences. I realized that my past did not define me; my actions in the present did. Now that I literally highlighted, it's green, it's highlighted. I think that's fantastic, because you know what, in recovery, that is a huge thing, right? If we can't let go of that, if we can't say, hey, that person in the past is dead and gone, and here I am now, then then that person in the past is never gonna be dead and gone, because he's gonna stay there. And I imagine, you know, it sounds kind of contrite, like me sitting here going, oh, hey, yeah, I'm talking about me and my drinking problem. I think that's probably a little bit harder for someone in your situation. I don't know how you did that, and my hat really does come off to you, because if I was in a drunk driving accident and I had killed somebody or two people in this instance, I think I would struggle very hard having that sort of mindset. So I know that this isn't a question, but I just really wanted to like take my hat off to you, because you're a testament to actually, you know, really living it. You know, you put one foot in front of the other and you're really getting after it. So, you know, God bless you for that. That's just fantastic.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, it's not like every day gets easier. That's for sure. But it's like making that conscious choice to do better, be better, like leave the world better. Like that's what drives me. This is sidebar, but I worked in a inpatient dual diagnosis drug and alcohol treatment center, and there was actually a couple people that had come through that had been in similar situations and just stuck, right? Like you said, that forgiveness component, like, and it takes a hot minute. For me, it did, because I was like, I will never forgive myself. I will never be forgiven. But when I looked at the spiritual aspect of it, it was like, and it's not to use it as a crutch, because I think a lot of people think, okay, well, you're going to use a spiritual angle to use it as a crutch to justify how you can forgive yourself and like keep it moving. But for me, it was more like, I mean, God already paid the price for that. It says it. Why do I keep going back to pick it up?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cameron kind of beat me to it, because I realized too that we hadn't acknowledged. It's pretty incredible that you're sitting here in front of us. You're doing well in life. You're not living your life inside of a bottle or some other substance, and you're able to sit here and talk about it, you know, hopefully for the betterment of others. So that is pretty incredible. And I guess, I was going to ask how you were able to forgive yourself, but I guess you kind of just explained it with that last statement.
Yeah, that's a piece of
How
it.
did you
Because
find your way through that, I guess? Because I'm sure that was.
I don't want to give all my secrets away because it's in my book.
Yeah, you got the book. By the way, buy the book.
Yeah, but for real, it really just came to like processing that, like being okay to feel however I felt about the situation, about myself, you know, whoever, because a lot of time, like in the beginning of that process, there was a lot of projection. Like this happened because of this or that, or like I made poor choices before and now this is my repercussion for this. Like, there's so many stories that I could probably share that I made up in my own head that none of them were true. Right. And so it came to the point where I was like, the only way I'm going to be able to move forward is to have some kind of acceptance that this is part of me. This is who I am, whether I like it or not. And the only way that I can move forward, not only for myself and my conscious and the rest of my future, but be able to help the next person, because like what you said, sharing this is not something that I do to be like, oh, hey, look at me. I share it because I want to be able to help the next person who's struggling, who doesn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, know that there's still a plan and purpose for them. And it just comes down to being able to do the footwork to make it happen and execute. Get with the people that are doing it. That's what I had to do. I had to level up and get around people that were further along or where I wanted to be, because if I stayed where water was, my own level, I was never going to grow. So the forgiveness piece just came as part of it. And, the holidays are still difficult. I can't even imagine how difficult for the family. But my first holiday was Thanksgiving. And I remember sitting at the table, like, I do not deserve to be at this table with my family right now. Like, there's people that don't have their loved ones. Who am I to think that I deserve Thanksgiving? And so there was a lot of that went into it along the process. It definitely wasn't something that happened overnight.
We had a really awesome guest, and she had an accident and ended up in a wheelchair. She was paraplegic, but previously she was completely able-bodied. And we talked a lot about how her recovering from her accident was pretty much exactly the same thing as us recovering from alcohol. And I'm hearing the same thing here again, you recovering from your trauma. It's all recovery. And the afflictions are different. But the ideas are the same. And, we can sit here and beat ourselves up. I had a lot of people, I had an extended period of clean time, and then I relapsed, and I had a lot of people sit here and tell me, hey, you beating yourself up. It's not helping anything. It's not helping you move forward. And, when you think about it in those terms, it's like, what am I supposed to do? Just feel sorry for myself the rest of my life and never do anything positive and never help anyone. So instead you've chosen to be better and to do better and to help other people. I was curious, the mental health and substance abuse thing, was that something that you went towards as a result of what happened, or were you already headed on that path, or no?
Oh, I wanted to be a flight nurse.
Okay.
I wanted to be like in the action, the trauma, all that stuff. And I lost my EMT license. And it was really by the grace of God that I was able to sit for the State Board of Nursing, because there was a 4-year gap from when I graduated to when I actually took boards. And it was never on my radar until those things kind of happened. And then I went through what I went through and saw what I saw while I was incarcerated, and just the lack of, like, the criminal justice system in the United States is pitiful. Like, we think we can incarcerate our way out of a paper bag, like everything. It's not even feasible. Everybody comes home, and if there's no plan set in place to help elevate that person or resources, no wonder why they end up in the system. And I actually heard one of my friends, she said, incarceration is the new slavery. And that was like mind-boggling to me. I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. Like, they're making money off of us.
Or profit.
They're making money off of us.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so it was really like, it came to the point where I was like, okay, so what do I want to do and go back to school? So I chose forensic nursing because I had the lived experience, and I came to the realization people care about two things. They care about your credentials, or they care about your experience. I figured, okay, well, I had all the experience, both on all sides of it. Not that I was proud of it, but how can I use this to leverage the future in a positive way? So I went and got my forensic nursing to have the credentials as well.
Yeah.
You know, I have a lot of friends too in nursing, addicts that they had something happen in charges and they got their license taken away and had a lot of trouble getting back in or don't. So I am curious how you were able to get through that with the charges that you have.
Yeah. So when I took my plea, I had misdemeanor. So all the felonies dropped. I didn't have any felonies. But whenever we went to the Harrisburg, which is our capital in Pennsylvania, had to go to the state board of nursing and like hold a special hearing and had an attorney for all of that, character witnesses. Like it's a huge deal. It's a huge process, right? Because they're like, okay, well, you've already really screwed up as a public servant. Like, how can you consider even justifying letting this person enter in a similar role, if not one that holds even more weight, right?
Yeah.
And so that process was, I say, another God thing. I mean, I gave up my EMT license. They had put restrictions on my license that like it would say that it was encumbered, even though I'd never been in trouble as a nurse. It was something to kind of just keep things in check. I had to be on the nursing probation for like 3 years. It's different than what you're talking about, because I know what you're talking about. I know a lot of people who've been through that kind of situation. But it wasn't until I actually went to go to apply for that forensic nursing at Duquesne I was talking about, and I was denied entry because of my license and wasn't allowed to go to school there. And 3 days later, it was overturned by the State Board of Nursing, and they revoked all of the rest of my probation and said, no, you're going to go to school. And I was admitted to Duquesne like 3 days later.
Nice. So at what point did you, after you went through all your schooling and you overcame that triumph, at what point did you decide to write the book?
I actually had the book written, sat in email outbox probably 2012, 2014.
Okay.
And it's a good thing I didn't publish it then, because I was not in the process of like where I am now. And it probably would have probably set me back as far as like my healing process goes. And it probably wouldn't have done the service that it's doing now, because I was always very cognizant of how things would be written out as to not cause more harm to the situation that I already caused. And so I had a lot of reservation. The Associated Press came to me in 2014 and they wanted to write my story. I had lunch with them at Panera and I was like, no, like now's not the time.
If you guys can't do better than Panera, then you don't get my story.
Yeah, no, straight out, dude. I need a medium rare steak with like potatoes. Yeah. What are we doing, dude? You might as well take me to Taco Bell. Come on,
blue
get out.
Cheese encrusted. You know what's up. All right. So it was actually, I heard Annie Ann Baylor. She's on the front of my book. I heard her testimony at Victory Church in Cranberry. And it was a Life Surge event. And it was in that moment I knew it was time to write my book. And I wrote my book within like 30 days max.
Nice. Go ahead.
One of the things that struck me when I was listening to one of your podcasts, and I'm sure people listening now, is I think a lot of people, so there's such a, what's the word when you judge an addict?
Stigma.
Discrimination.
Yeah, no, stigma. There's
Yeah,
such a stigma around addicts and alcoholics and stuff, and what people think about people who do like what you did, for example. And here we have this doctor sitting in front of us who's done 10 years of higher education and now devoted her life to, helping people. And I think it's just a really great reminder. And, for the record, two other guys who could be sitting here telling your same story. I mean, who could 1000%. And I'm getting chills thinking about it because I could have done that 1,000 times, and so could have Cameron. So it's just very interesting to put into perspective. You don't know who it's going to happen to or why it's going to happen, and people want to like all the low life, whatever, but it's like everyone makes mistakes and things happen, and you probably didn't drink half as much in college as Cameron and I drank in 1 month, of our addiction, and it's just, but it's just puts it into perspective, that these things can happen to anyone, and for people to not be so quick to judge people, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, to piggyback off that real quick, I mentioned the timeline of when I stopped drinking and when the accident happened on purpose, because most people shut the bar down 2 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
2:30. You're like, okay. And they're getting up to go to work the next day, driving 7, 8 o'clock. It is the exact same timeline, just reversed, where we all think, right? When we've done that, we all think, okay, we're fine. We're going to work in the morning. And the same thing can show up at somebody's door. And that's the one thing that if there's anything that I would hope people take away, is that, like, we never know what'll show up at our door. And I swear that the universe has this way of putting it at our doorstep. If it's something that we judge or really have like some hard feelings about, it'll show up at your door, because you're going to have to base it one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree. And I think there's one other thing I have for you, which it's kind of, it's still on topic, but one of my favorite books of all time is The Body Keeps Score. And so you've done all these, this healing and all that, like you mentioned in your book, and you look fantastic. And like I said, this conversation's been great. How do you process? Do some of those dark thoughts of the past still creep up on you, like they do for us? Because sometimes, some days I'm sitting around here and things I've done in the past that pale in comparison to things that have happened to you, will creep up, and they can trigger me. You know what I mean? Like, they can hit me and be like, oh, fuck, there it is. I don't like that. You know what I mean? And then luckily I have ways to process that nowadays, but they still show up. Now, I imagine that, maybe around Thanksgiving or something like that, does that still hit you after all this time?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would be like a complete asshole if I said no, first of all.
I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, but I mean, anything that we go through, I mean, like I said, I can only take it back to myself, because I know that's how it's supposed to go. But like, I can only, like, yeah, bottom line is, yeah, all the time, daily. Like, let's be honest, sometimes it'll still happen daily, especially doing like the kind of work I do, mental health, substance use. Like, it's stuff that's always like at the front door. And the devil's really good at like trying to like tell you, like, hey, who are you to be doing this or saying this, or those kind of like the things. And I would say that the trauma has a weird way, right? It's going to come out one way or the other. So I've just learned to like pause and process that moment, because if not, I'm either going to get like snappy, sleep like crap, feel like garbage. Like, it's going to come out some way. But yeah, absolutely. To answer your question, that stuff still happens. It still comes up. I don't expect it to go away, because if that was like, I would be a psychopath. And I don't use that word loosely. I'm just saying, like, that I would have no feelings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So did I hear? So you're saying when those feelings do come up, or thoughts, your method, what you like to do is try to process it right now and go walk yourself through it, as opposed to like stuffing it away and moving on?
Depends on what it is. Most of the time, yes. Because if I stuff it, I know how that's going to turn out, right? It's not going to turn out good. Whatever that looks like, it's not going to be good. But sometimes I can't figure out why that thought has crept up. Like, what was that trigger? That's the part that messes with me the most. Like, what was the trigger? Why am I sleeping like garbage? And sometimes it'll just take like me kind of just being in check and just kind of like backtracking to try to figure that out. Sometimes I can't figure it out. Maybe it's like a smell, maybe it's a food, maybe it's a location, like something that subconscious is just like, oh, hell no, we're not doing this today. And that's okay. I am okay with giving myself grace to maybe just not know.
Okay.
Yeah, that's important. I do have one last question before we get to the questions we ask everyone. When do you, or have you had any kind of contact with the victims' families
No.
since the trial? No.
So Great question, because that's one that I feel like people always want to know the answer to. But I can only speak for the state of Pennsylvania. I don't know how the other states work, but Pennsylvania is very much like, and I hate to say the word victim because I mean, it has like such a context, but in this situation, like the family members would be the ones that would have the right to initiate any of that. The person, me, the perpetrator, like the offender, to use those kind of like classic words that everybody knows, I am not allowed, like was not allowed, you're not allowed to reach out. There is an option in the state of Pennsylvania where, like, if I wanted, I could write a letter and send it to the Office of Victim Advocate, and it could sit in like their box in case the family ever like reached out to see or anything like that. But other than that, it's, I mean, first off, it's kind of like taboo. Like, why would you kind of just do that? But in the state of Pennsylvania, you're also not allowed.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess part of my curiosity is I would wonder, I would think, sometimes after 10 years, they might want to say, hey, I forgive you, or hey, I still hate you, or whatever else. It's just it's very interesting, and I got to be honest, just sitting here, it's it's very interesting because, like, my brain is telling me to judge you, but I think what you're doing is very courageous. And as I said, I could have absolutely done what you did, and I don't say that lightly. I say that as in, I drove drunk and probably way more intoxicated than you were that night a million times. So it's very interesting what's happening inside my head, where it's like, oh, this, shame on her, knowing that it could have been me behind the wheel. So it's just very interesting to what's going on in my head, and to be sitting here with someone who this has actually happened to.
I really appreciate that honesty and transparency, because I think that really brings to light just how our unconscious bias and stigma in general as humans is trained to just jump straight to that, like, she's a piece of crap. And especially as a female, right? So if you look at statistics, a woman who's been incarcerated and that situation is less than it would be as a man. So that's an additional layer where people are extra
Judgmental,
courteous, if you will, in their judgment.
Yeah.
Freely, like they feel entitled to judge. But that's on, and I'm not saying this to you, but I'm saying, like, when I think about that, I think about it's that person and their process. Like, it's not me. There's nothing that I can do to change that, but just keep doing the next right thing.
Exactly.
Other people's opinions of me are none of my business.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because I can get caught up in that, right? That's going to keep me stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talk about that a lot, like people pleasing and worrying about what other people think, but you're never going to make everyone happy, and you're never, no, everyone's not going to love you or like you or whatever. And that's okay. We don't spend our lives to try and make every single person ever love us or be happy with us. And when we did, or when I did, I was miserable because I was people pleasing and trying to please everyone. And that's an impossible task.
Yeah. When I went to write my book, a lot of close people around me got a little nervous. They were even supportive, right? Because they're like, what is it? What's it about? Like, kind of, are our names in it? Like, all these things, right? And I was like, it's none of that. That's not the purpose. The purpose of the book is not he said, she said, these specifics. It is to hopefully help guide and unstick somebody else. Like, and I think that that's really worth mentioning, because I still, even in my close circle, had people who were like backing off when I decided that this was going to be the thing. This was going to be something that I was going to move forward with, because it was like, what kind of Pandora's box are we going to be associated with? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know Hen said one last question, but I have to get one more in. And just because you see, I'm a Catholic, and you being a Christian woman as well. So I'm just curious. Are you grateful for your suffering?
That's a really good question. I am grateful, not at the cost that it cost others, but I'm grateful to have whatever has happened to me, all that's happened to me, be part of my story, because there's a lot of other people who are either not talking about it, been through it, or are currently going through it, that they just need somebody to know that they can relate to them. So yes, but not at the cost that it's cost people that have been hurt along the way.
Yeah, and I
That's
think
a very sharp answer.
it's a really good answer. It was exactly what I was hoping you would say. Yes, it was perfect. Okay, so let's get right into our last two. These are real short, and thank you so much for sitting down with us. Really, it's been fantastic. What is your favorite part of recovery?
My favorite part is seeing people be empowered to believe in themselves.
Hell yeah.
That's like my favorite part about coaching people, because I do like coaching and,
Consulting,
keynote
yeah.
speaking, all that consulting. And when you see the light bulb, the shift that they have worth, that's the best thing.
I'm getting the warm fuzzies because I know exactly what you're talking about. That's beautiful. And then the last one is, what would you tell someone who's struggling right now?
I would say reach out. It is the hardest thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so taboo, because that's what I feel like everybody says, right? But like legit, reach out. I don't care if it is to like your best friend, a professional, 988. A lot of people still don't know about 988. So I'm going to give that little plug there. And you don't have to be suicidal to call it. You need someone to talk, just call. It's a stranger. Maybe you don't want to talk to somebody you know, but just reach out.
Love that.
Learn to forgive yourself. It's harder than said than done, but that combination will be life-changing.
Yeah.
A problem shared is a problem cut in half.
Amen to that, brother. Amen to that.
Yes. Beautiful.
You know what, that 988 number is actually really clutch. I've called that number a couple times in my past when I was drinking. It helped me a lot, to be honest with you. So I'll plug it too. So go ahead.
Yes, good. Let's also plug that you can text it, you can chat it. So you don't, if you're like, I don't even want to be on the phone with somebody because whatever, you can text.
I think that's an important distinction to make too, that what if some people are like, well, I'm not suicidal, I'm just really sad. Well, text them or call them anyway. I'm sure they'll be happy to talk to you.
They will.
Housing issues, food, all the things, call them.
Well, great.
They will listen.
That's great. So thank you so much for coming on. And I really think it's incredible what you're doing, that you're sharing your story. And we share our stories for the same exact reason, because people might think they're alone, or that no one understands them, or that no one's gone through what they've gone through. And I keep thinking about how, as addicts, we don't like someone in a position of power, like at a rehab, telling us what to do, that learned it from a book. So I could imagine where, somebody's like, you wouldn't get it. And you're like, oh, listen, trust me, motherfucker, I get it. Because you probably don't use that language.
Epic, because like you said, when I swear to gosh, I remember telling this person that I was incarcerated. They're like, yeah, right. Like, you're full of crap.
You
I'm
don't
like,
get it, fancy doctor lady.
People see the success. They don't see the grind to get there.
Exactly. Hey, so before we kick you out of here, you want to plug your book and tell us where people can find you?
Sure. My book is Transforming Trauma into Triumph. It is on Amazon. You can also email me too if you want a signed copy. I will mail you one, but on my link, it's on here, www.ShaneaClancy.com. Do I need to spell that?
You can. I'll put a link in the description.
Okay, yeah, because my name is not basic. It's totally unbasic. Yeah, so reach out there, and I actually have 3 more books that are dropping next month.
Look at you.
Wow.
She's getting after it. And I will extend the thank you that Henry gave you. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for being you. And thank you for not being another statistic where, something bad happened and then you just spiraled out of control. Thank you for pulling your own self out of the fire with, God's help and your own damn, sheer willpower to make it happen, and doing the right thing, because people are sick and people need help, and people need to know that no matter what happens, you can get out on the other side. You wrote a wonderful book. I enjoyed reading it, and everybody, please go pick it up. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. You guys are rock stars. Keep spreading the message.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, hey, take care. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Damn, dude, I got to give a quick synopsis on this one before I get out of here. Ready? If you're listening to this episode right now, okay? Ready? What the fuck is your excuse? What the fuck is your excuse? What the fuck is your excuse, dude? What is your excuse? Ready? You don't have one. You don't have one. You don't. You like to tell yourself that you have one.
Yeah.
You like to make yourself believe that you have one, and you sure as hell like to convince yourself that, hey, this is what it is. No, dude, no. There's no excuse. You can change your fucking life. You can turn your life around. She is a living testament to that, and so are the millions of other people in the world that are doing the exact same thing as she is. You know what I mean? It may not be that exact circumstance, but fuck me, dude. I mean, I don't know if I could pull myself out of that. What a wonderful woman. You know what I mean? And we all make mistakes. Hen, you said a lot of really good stuff in there, man. Like, dude, we fuck up in this life. We fuck up, but what are we doing afterwards?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. It's like I work manual labor every day, but I still make it to the gym. She has the best excuse you could possibly think of to give up on life and be a piece of crap and never do anything ever again. And I can't imagine. I probably would find my death at the bottom of a bottle or a bag if that happened to me. So the fact that she went on to finish her schooling and her career and then go ahead and help more people that are in our situation, I mean, what's your excuse?
There isn't one. There isn't one. Yeah, and then becomes a number one best-selling author. You know what I mean? And like I said, the book is fantastic. It's a nice light read. I read it in like one day. 180 pages. It's wonderful. It's chock full of a whole bunch of inspirational stuff. Great Bible verses between each chapter that are really motivating. It's a really great read, and I think you guys should all go and support her. So before I get out of here, Hen, is there anything else you want to say before I give him the spiel?
Give him the spiel, man. That was a great episode.
That was, dude. I'm like 6 to midnight over here, dude. That was fantastic. Anyways, dude. So, follow us on Instagram. We're active there. Henry has fantastic internet. I have my ring light on today, so we should have some super stellar new reels. I'm going to chop up some little teasers for everybody because we didn't have anything last week to post. So I'm going to actually get on that tomorrow. There'll be some new reels. Go in and buy that book that we're talking about, and we love you very much. So I will finish this like I always do. I love you, Hen, very much. What a fantastic episode. I am uplifted.
I love you too, Cameron. And remember, you have no excuse to not be yourself and fuck what they think.
Zero excuses, brother. Later, dude.